Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Valentin's review for the Crucible. Today we're going to go over some literary terms, we're going to look at some of the characters, and then we're going to take a look at some grammar points, the appositive, independent, and dependent clause. So let's take a look. The first thing is we have a set of literary terms. Remember on the test, your literary terms will be in alphabetical order, which will be helpful for picking out the correct choice. So first things first, characterization. Characterization, is details in the text that give information about the character. External conflict. Remember, there's two types of conflict. External conflict is conflict with an outside force. So that could be man versus man, man versus nature, man versus a supernatural force. We then have imagery. And imagery is visually descriptive language. Especially in a literary work. Internal conflict is conflict within the self. So man versus self. A metaphor, it's a comparison in a text that does not use like or as. Then we get to mood, and mood can be tricky because mood and tone can often feel similar. When we talk about mood, it's the feeling the entire text gives us. A monologue, we had a couple monologues in our speech, especially with Reverend Harris and John Proctor, which is a long, uninterrupted speech. A paradox is a juxtaposition between two ideas. Personification, giving like characteristics to non-living or inanimate objects. Point of view, and point of view is where things get tricky. Our point of view in a text is a particular attitude, or way of considering things. Oftentimes, when we talk about it in literature, we're talking about first person versus second person, etc. Setting is the time and place of the story, and simile is a comparison that uses like or as. A soliloquy is, and we don't see too many of these, but we have seen them in Hamlet, so we might as well just carry over some of the same literary terms. A soliloquy is when a character reveals private thoughts and the character's alone on stage. Just shrink that. We also have stage directions, which are instructions in the text of a play. Indicating movement or position. shrink that down. And finally, we're down to tone. Just get all this in order. Nothing's working. That's okay. Whoa, that's definitely wrong. Alrighty. Well, I'm just going to stick with it. Alright, tone. Alright, is... If mood is the entire text, alright, giving us that kind of feelings, the tone is individual. Alright, so the feeling maybe that the speech gives us, or it could be an individual part. So it could be like, oh, that chapter made us feel sad, or that chapter made us feel antagonistic. All right, so there's that. All right, so know your literary terms. I'm just going to ask you what the straight-up definition is, not necessarily providing an example. And here's a list of characters that we should know. I don't think there's anybody on here that's too difficult. All right, I'm going to provide some information. Obviously, this isn't everything about these characters. All right, but Abigail Williams, we know she had the affair with John Proctor. She's the one who's causing all the trouble. I don't think there's any surprises with her. But you should know these characters. Take a look at your study guides. They'll be a little bit clearer. I wanted to list Betty because Betty is the person who causes the story to start. All right, they're surrounded by her. All right, so Paris's daughter. She is lying inert at the beginning. Danforth. Now, a lot of people think Danforth was the judge, but that's actually not the case. Danforth oversees the witch trials. He likes to think of himself as like this fair-minded individual, even if that's not necessarily the truth. Elizabeth Proctor, we know is Proctor's wife, John Proctor's wife. We know she was ill for a period of time after she had the baby. Her most recent one. They had 3 children. We know she has quite the strong disgust for Abigail Williams. So just keep that in mind. Giles Corey. We know Giles is kind of this hardworking farmer. He's old, senile, we've described him as. Hawthorne, all right, is the judge in this case. All right, so there's that. He stays pretty quiet throughout most of it. Hale, remember Hale comes to Salem to kind of rid of witchcraft. He sees the errors in his ways later on. You know, he feels really bad about how things unfolded, and he sees Abigail for the liar that she is. John Proctor, our protagonist. All right, we know he has the affair with Abigail. I wouldn't describe him as a good person, but the story certainly wants us to sympathize with him. Mary Warren, we know she's the one who has fainting issues. I don't know how else to describe that. She can faint, then she can't. When she's put on the spot, she can't. She accuses John Proctor later on of being a witch. She made the poppet for Elizabeth, which we know gets her in a lot of trouble. All right. Paris, we know, is the Reverend, who people don't like. Especially Proctor does not like him. Rebecca Nurse. Rebecca Nurse is important because she's the character who makes Hale change. She's described as holy. And once she's accused, there's kind of no hope for the rest of the story, that everyone's kind of awful and antagonistic. We have Ruth. I wanted to list Ruth because she's the daughter of the Putnams. So that's important. The Putnam family might also appear on the test. Remember, they're the ones who are having issues with having children. And she always has, she's accusatory towards everyone else. So just keep that in mind. Sarah Good. All right, she's the old woman. She gets hanged. She's hung. She's old. And she's pregnant, supposedly. And they back that up with information, which is kind of terrifying. All right. Cool. All right. And the only other character I don't have on here is Tituba. And we know Tituba was the slave, and we know how she was treated. So make sure you just kind of jot her down. All right. This is just some of the information. I'm not saying this is necessarily the information that's going to be in your fill in the blank, but if you know enough about these characters, you're familiar with them, this won't pose too much of a problem. For this last part, all right, that you're going to see on the test, all right, is all about your independent, dependent, and appositive phrases. Depending on your class, you might also have coordinating conjunctions. So if I talk about coordinating conjunctions and you didn't hear that in your class, then that doesn't pertain to you. But if I did, all right, then, well, then it does pertain to you. All right, so I'm going to use these 3 colors, and I'm just going to start with these 4 examples because that's all we're going to see here. All right. Cool. So, remember, an independent clause means it can stand completely alone. All right, it's all by its lonesome. A dependent clause depends on the rest of the sentence, sometimes referred to as the subordinate clause. You should be able to move it around, and the text still makes sense. The appositive phrase is information that's inserted into the sentence. If you take the appositive out, the sentence should still make sense. So, wish I had a highlighter. Okay, so first sentence. George, who loves pizza, can't stand pepperoni. All right, you can often hear where the commas should go. All right. Don't forget, you're expected to be able to maybe write a sentence that uses these, and you'll have to label them with colors. I'll have color pens available for you. So, George, who loves pizza, can't stand pepperoni. Hopefully, you can hear the appositive phrase, which is, who loves pizza? Okay. And so, George can't stand pepperoni is the independent clause. All right, and don't forget, we put in our commas. Cool. After the game, the football team celebrated. Again, you might hear where the comma goes, but you always kind of look for the independent clause. That kind of helps you if you start with that. So what's the independent clause of this sentence? The part that stands alone. And of course, it's the football team celebrated. After the game is your dependent clause. And so we know our comma goes where the two connect. And of course, as always, you should be able to move this around. you should be able to say, whoa, the football team celebrated after the game. That was a little dramatic for me. There we go. All right, so you should be able to move this to the end. Mm-hmm. While going to the supermarket, I bumped into my second grade teacher. What part stands alone in this sentence? And of course, I bumped into my second grade teacher, which means while going to the supermarket is our dependent clause, and our comma would go there. All right, so we're going to do the same thing again. All right, I'm going to use, as I did just a moment ago, I'm going to use green for my independent. I'm going to use red for my dependent. I guess it's a magenta. I'm going to use blue for my positive. And this time, on this slide, I'm going to use purple for my coordinating conjunction. So, we begin. When Sam, who was 49, went to the comedy show, he found a $20 bill. When Sam, who was 49, went to the comedy show, he found a $20 bill. So this sentence uses all three independent, dependent, and appositive phrases. So we're going to have to be able to identify that. Hopefully, you found the independent clause, which is he found a $20 bill. Our positive phrase, who was 49, and when Sam went to the comedy show, is our dependent. You then insert your commas as necessary. And that's it. All right. Again, you should be able to take this out, and the sentence makes sense. When Sam went to the comedy show, he found a $20 bill. It does, so it works. Cool. Maurice went to the party. He then went to his house. What do we have here? First thing you want to do is identify the independent clause, which is Maurice went to the party. He then went to his house is also an independent clause. So we can't separate this with a comma. So we need to either add a conjunction, maybe use a period, and capitalize he, or you could use a semicolon, anything of the sort. Here we go. I enjoyed the day, but I was worried about my upcoming test. So depending on your class, all right, this is where we start to see the use of the conjunction. Our independent clause, I enjoy the day. Our other independent clause, I was worried about my upcoming test. But is our coordinating conjunction, and our comma goes there. Next one. When studying for the AP exam, I found myself struggling, so I called the teacher. I don't know why you would have their phone number, but neither here nor there. When studying for the AP exam, I found myself struggling, so I called the teacher. Now, you may see the word so and realize it's a coordinating conjunction. So that's a good clue as to making sure this is an independent clause. I called the teacher, and it is. we also have another independent clause. Remember, a coordinating conjunction joins two independent clauses together. I found myself struggling. We note our coordinating conjunction. So when studying for the AP exam, is the dependent clause. It's entirely possible on the test you'll have all four. And you may want to consider practicing writing some, as you know I am inclined to do so. Make you do so anyway. And that's it. If you have any other questions, please see me for extra help. And don't forget to review your Act 3 vocabulary, as that will also appear on your Crucible test. Good luck.